I got into the study of empathy because I was having trouble with some behavioral issues with my daughter when she was around, probably 6 or 7 years old. And I was sharing that with a friend, and she had told me about some tools that were working for her. And it had to do with a format called nonviolent communication. And it was basically the study devised by Marshall Rosenberg, our mentor and guru in the field. He basically looked into why people did and said what they said instead of judging. So because she was in school and we were having a lot of punitive measures, it was all about trying to correct the behavior. And once I started to get into nonviolent communication, I started to have more empathy and compassion for the behavior. Because the theory is that anything we say or do is an attempt to meet a need. So instead of judging the way that my daughter was trying to meet some needs, I got curious. I started to understand what was alive in my daughter. She was wanting connection and not understanding because her brain didn't take in information, memorize it, and spit it back out. Her brain was more of a visionary brain that needed visual stimulation to learn and collaborative work to experience it and have it stick for her. So in the mainstream of school, that was really difficult. And so through time, I learned the value of empathy, which is really the basis of emotional intelligence. People will say, well, you made me mad, or, you hurt my feelings, right? And so the idea is nobody does anything to us. Nobody makes us feel anything. Things happen. And when they happen, we feel because of a need, right? So if my daughter wasn't invited to a birthday party, right, that's not what made her feel sad. She felt sad because she had a need for belonging and to matter. And so it's really about leaning in and looking at what universal need might be alive in the human that's having a pain or a trigger, and leaning in with curiosity, which is what empathy is. I basically listen through a filter. And when people talk, it's like a little ding goes off when I hear the need. Because if we spend too much time trying to analyze or evaluate what somebody's doing, right, we're not getting to the heart of what's alive inside of them. And so with this work, it's a muscle we strengthen, and it helps us hear differently. And so if we start to listen, we call it with giraffe ears, because giraffe is the symbol of compassion in the modality of nonviolent communication. So we kind of put our giraffe ears on and listen with our heart about what's going on inside of them. And that is what helps us not take it personally. Because if we're listening to them and remind ourselves it has nothing to do with us, then we're able to connect because we are open. Our hearts are open. And one of the ways I help people do that is this idea of when you notice yourself in judgment, if you're making anybody bad, stupid, or wrong, yourself included, if you notice you're in judgment, one of the ways you can quickly self-correct is ask yourself the question, what is the most generous or heart-open interpretation I could have here? One of the tips I like to offer people there that can reduce an argument instantly is taking a breath and asking the other person, what is it you'd like me to hear right now? And it usually slows them down a little bit and helps them restate it, and that's your opportunity right there to give them empathy. So what I'm hearing is that you're frustrated and you would like to be heard. Or you're overwhelmed and you need some support. Is that correct? So there's a modeling, there's a practice, and when you strengthen the muscle, it comes pretty naturally. And it really changes the way you see the world. As a mother to a child that has struggled with severe neurodiversity her entire life, she's now 21, I have a real passion and deep compassion for those children. Not only because of my own history with my daughter, I've sat at table after table with teacher after teacher in the mainstream system trying to have them understand that she thought differently. and diagnosed with ADD and ODD and the things that we call things. To me, those are judgments. Those are labels rather than the curiosity about why. What's going on inside of this child that's creating disruption? And so that's where I started to lean in. One of the tools I created for my daughter, she was in maybe 4th grade. And literally I was at the principal's office or getting a sticky note from the teacher every day about something she had done wrong. And I was watching her spirit fade. She was miserable. She was having isolation from peers because her frustration was showing through her body. So she was fidgety. She might be a little aggressive when she wanted fairness and a turn on the swing. And so every day I would get a little note. And then they send these notes home thinking the parent is going to fix the problem and send them back, studious. And so I tried that. And what I noticed was it was only amplifying everything. It was, timeouts were making her more angry, more volatile, and sad. It was making her miserable. And so I came up with something that I called a reflection journal. And basically the steps of nonviolent communication are observation, feeling, need, request. So the idea is to objectify the situation. What happened? It's the factual account, as if you have a GoPro on your head. What's recordable? When Susie took my pencil, right? How did you feel? I was mad, right? That's an appropriate response. If someone takes your pencil, it's appropriate to be mad. But the difference is not mad at Susie, mad because she had a need for kindness, consideration, choice, right? So there were some things there that created the anger, but what's getting judged is the anger, right? We want to have compassion for the anger because it's rooted in a need. So I started to print out pages of these 4 steps on one sheet, and I made a notebook. So she'd come home with that paper, and we'd talk about it. It would be, so what happened? Well, I was talking while the teacher was talking. Oh. Well, when you were talking while she was talking, how were you feeling? I was bored. And then I said, well, how do you imagine the teacher felt? So this is how we start to get her to have empathy for other people. Well, how do you imagine the teacher might have felt when you were talking while she was talking? Probably frustrated. And I might feed her some words, she was little. And she said, probably frustrated. I said, yeah, makes sense she would be frustrated, right? She said, yeah. And I said, well, what need do you think was alive for her? What do you think she was trying to accomplish? That was a hard one. And she would say, well, maybe to teach. I said, yeah, or to be heard, right? She was trying to contribute to the students, be in integrity with her job. I'm feeding her these so she starts to get the muscle strengthened. Well, how do you imagine you could meet your need for fun and she could meet her need for being heard and contributing to the students? Well, I could play at recess. You could play at recess. And that was the empowerment. That was the magic. And the more we did it, the more she, saw that she wasn't wrong for trying to meet a need. It just started to illuminate that it might be at the cost of other people's needs. And so that's where her young emotional intelligence developed, because it's about mindfulness. What's alive in me? What's alive in them? And is there a way to meet as many of each needs as possible? And so that's empathy. And so I kind of illustrated the system of it, but really what's important is the intention. It's the intention of compassion. Because you can learn the steps and you can learn the vocabulary. But if we're not willing to shift from what someone does to us versus what someone's experiencing, then we're going to continue to have the spiral of conflict. But so, yeah, we used this reflection journal for a long time. We just be the mirror. What I see is this, is that true? And then validation. That must be really frustrating. Or I can see how that would be frustrating. And it really makes difference. I call that the magic. There's a point where there's magic. Something softens. A lot of the times when I work one-on-one with people, I can almost see it in their chest and in their shoulders. It's like the heart softens and they breathe. And I like to think just to channel my heart to your heart. Then what happens, right? Because that's where humanity is. That's where we're all connected. And if we can just remember to slow down enough and breathe into the possibility of the pain somebody's carrying. They'll say if someone cuts you off and we call them a jerk, right? Well, rather than have judgment, what if we open our hearts and slow down so they can get in front of us in case they're saying goodbye to a loved one, right? We never know someone's pain. We don't know their stories. And empathology is all about being curious about what that is. Yeah. One of the insights I got in diving deeper into the parent coaching role is that a lot of our kids are in pain. A lot of kids, there's a lot of diversity right now. Neurodiversity has become one of those diversities. And one of the things I've noticed in my work is that a lot of children are in pain because they don't necessarily have a safe place to be their authentic selves, whether it's gender, whether it's sexuality, or whether it's the way they think. And that's why my focus on parenting support for parents of neurodiverse children is so important, because that has been my life's work with this work. It's what I do every day. It's how I respond to my daughter. And it's truly the way I find responding to children in general makes parenting a way more joyous experience. And being parented, because our kids are set up in the world to be evaluated every which way they turn. Social media, classrooms, each other. Junior high has got to be one of the most detrimental times for kids to go through middle school because the comparisons and the pain that's inflicted on one another. And so with this work, I was able to create a separation from my daughter and her environment, which helped her feel more empowered in the face of what presented. And that is a tool that I would love to teach parents, because home should be your safe haven. Home should be where you come after you've been exposed to everything, to land and be held and nurtured and listened to and understood. And so this work really helps parents see through a different lens, because parenting is hard. It's tiring. It's frustrating. But this work helps us see and hear our children very differently, because those that are neurodivergent are magical thinkers. They are visionaries. They are the ones. I remember the psychiatrist that diagnosed my daughter when she said, "Can you fix my brain?" He said, "Sweetheart, there's nothing wrong with your brain." And he looked at me and he said, "These are the game changers when they get to college. Just get her to college." And I'm happy to say she's a senior. We did it. So she's on her way to big and bright things. But they are the visionaries. They are the ones that can figure out things in a creative way, coupled with people who can make things happen, that can change our world. So I would love the opportunity to work with parents so that they can get the support they need to rest in parenting a little bit more, to relax into the unfoldment of who their child is, and to bridge that gap, to invite curiosity, to invite the child to share their discoveries, their pains, their excitements. And so together it's a journey where we learn how to reconstruct the parenting model, because it's very different. It's not control and it's not power. It is curiosity, and it is permission for these kids to be who they are and to be met there. It just takes a little bit to change the course of everything. So, yeah, it rocks my world. I love it. And it's transformed the way I see myself, the way I see others, and the way I connect. I find myself in awe time and time again, the power that empathy can have where there's pain.